Before this video starts, I just want to say that I had to edit it quite a bit for copyright and content, but it is available uncensored on my Patreon. Link in the description and the pinned comment. The PSA I just showed you basically explains everything. I've talked about wrestling many times on this channel. I've even made 2 videos focusing on nothing but wrestling, but I wanted to make a video focusing on the dark side of what can happen in a match. Let's get this out of the way. Wrestling is rehearsed and predetermined. We all know this. But that doesn't mean that things can never go wrong. There's many instances where wrestlers have serious, life-changing injuries or even lost their lives in the ring. And in this video, I'll be covering 14 of them. Here are 14 horrifying wrestling injuries. In 1990, Vader faced Stan Hansen in Japan in a match that became notorious for a gruesome real injury. This bout took place at the Tokyo Dome Super Fight, where Vader, who was then the IWGP Heavyweight Champion, battled Hansen in a cross-promotional showdown. Both men were infamous for their extremely stiff, hard-hitting wrestling styles. Hansen, already a legend in Japan, had notoriously poor eyesight. He often swung full force so his strikes actually landed, and Vader was equally feared for his brutal offense. Mick Foley once noted Vader's style was, quote, the stiffest in all wrestling. The stage was set for a very physical encounter, and neither man held back from the opening bell. During an exchange of heavy punches early in the match, one of Hansen's wild left-handed blows caught Vader directly in the face. The strike was so stiff that it literally knocked Vader's eye out of the socket. Vader's left eyeball actually popped out and was left hanging under his mask, held only by the surrounding tissue. In a shocking display, Vader reportedly shouted, "Stan, you popped my eye out," before yanking off his mask and manually pushing the eyeball back into place with his hand. The gruesome injury was apparent once his mask came off. His eye area was grotesquely swollen and essentially shut. Amazingly, Vader refused to stop the match. He continued fighting with the damaged eye, trading stiff blows with Hansen, who had apparently also broken Vader's nose with that punch. The brawl raged on despite the horrific injury, eventually ending in a double countout with both men still fighting outside the ring. In the end, the disturbing eye incident overshadowed everything else about the match. It's remembered as one of wrestling's most brutal real moments, and it cemented Vader's reputation as an unbelievably tough competitor for finishing the fight with his eye out of its socket. Believe it or not, this match also features Vader, though unfortunately for him, he isn't the one suffering the injury this time. On March 16, 1994, during a WCW tour stop in Munich, Germany, Vader wrestled Mick Foley, aka Cactus Jack. Foley and Vader already had a reputation for brutal, hard-hitting matches. In one bout, Vader even broke Foley's nose twice and dislocated his jaw while battering him. On this night, despite Vader nursing an arm injury, Foley was determined to deliver a big performance. He decided to attempt his notorious hangman stunt, a move where he'd purposely tangle his head between the ropes and appeared to hang by his neck. What Foley didn't know was that the ring ropes had just been tightened to their maximum tension by the crew. As Foley launched himself over the top rope, his neck got trapped far too tightly between the second and third ropes. Desperate, Foley began screaming for help. With no time to spare, he mustered all of his strength for one last burst and wrenched his head free. The force of yanking himself out was so extreme that it nearly ripped off his right ear. Foley later compared it to a wild animal chewing off its own limb to escape a trap. Free from the ropes, Foley collapsed to the floor, with his head ringing. Blood was pouring from his ear, dripping in a steady patter onto the mats around the ring. Incredibly, instead of stopping, Foley climbed back into the ring to continue the match. The mentality in pro wrestling is that the show has to go on, no matter what. Vader, not fully aware of the severity of the injury, hit Foley with a couple of stiff blows. Foley even quipped through the pain, "Nice juice, huh?" referring to the blood. But as the brawl continued, fans witnessed a ghastly sight. A piece of Foley's ear fell off and dropped to the canvas. The referee noticed the severed chunk of ear on the mat. He picked up the bloody piece of flesh in his hand, unsure how to communicate this to the wrestlers. The referee eventually handed it off to the ring announcer, who was so shocked he turned pale before rushing it backstage. WCW officials, with legendary wrestler Ric Flair among them, put Foley's ear in an ice bag, hoping it might be saved. After the match, the gravity of what happened sank in. Vader, the feared monster in the ring, was actually shaken and felt terrible about the accident. He even wanted to accompany Foley to the hospital, Mick Foley was rushed into surgery that night, but there was no way to reattach the torn part of his ear. It's been too mangled and the tissue had died. Surgeons removed the remaining damaged cartilage and later managed a bit of reconstructive work, but Foley was now permanently missing a part of his right ear. In the end, Mick Foley's gruesome injury in Munich became one of wrestling's legendary real-life horror stories. Any other wrestler probably would have been traumatized after losing a part of their body in a wrestling match. But if you know anything about Mick Foley, then you know that this was basically just another day at the office for him. In September 2012, at a small show put on by a promotion called Beyond Wrestling in Rhode Island, a young high-flying wrestler named Charade stepped into the ring for what was only his third professional match. This match, his Beyond Wrestling debut against fellow newcomer Black Baron, was supposed to be his chance to showcase his high-flying ability. Charade had a background in gymnastics and was known for his daring aerial moves, so he was determined to pull off something special to impress the crowd. During the match, Charade attempted an extremely ambitious move, a double moonsault. It was a very risky maneuver, and sadly, it went horribly wrong in an instant. He over-rotated in mid-air and came crashing down directly on the top of his head in the middle of the ring. The impact was brutal. The whole room went dead silent immediately. The announcers in the crowd were stunned into hushed disbelief, which was probably the most unsettling part of all. For a moment, everyone watching feared the absolute worst from that awful landing. Amazingly, Charade was still conscious. In fact, as Black Baron quickly went for the pin to end the match, Charade somehow managed to kick out at one, a show of adrenaline that defied the terrifying situation. That would be his last act in the match though. He couldn't really continue after that. In his compromised state, he was soon pinned for the 3 counts on a second attempt, mercifully ending the contest so he could receive medical attention. It was clear to everyone that Charade was badly hurt. The failed moonsault had legitimately fractured Charade's skull on impact. As terrible as that injury was, in a way he was also lucky. It could have been even worse, such as a broken neck or paralysis, given how he landed straight on his head. Charade was rushed to the hospital, and unsurprisingly, the footage of his horrifying accident soon spread online. A video of the incident went viral, shocking hundreds of thousands around the world, and it was even shown on the national TV comedy clip show Tosh.0, despite how graphic it was. Beyond Wrestling's promoter, Drew Cordeo, organised a fundraiser event to help cover Charade's medical bills. Incredibly, Charade made a full recovery and was back training for a return to the ring within just a few months. Even years later, the image of Charade's double moonsault is haunting. Those who saw it happen either in person or in the viral video afterwards will likely never forget the sight of a wrestler crashing headfirst onto the canvas. In November 1994, Sabu stepped into the ring with Chris Benoit. Sabu was famous for his insane high-risk style. They even called him homicidal, suicidal, and genocidal, and he was even wrestling that night with 3 broken ribs. Benoit was a rising star known for his intensity, and the Philadelphia crowd expected a wild, hard-hitting match. Neither man nor the fans could have predicted how quickly it would turn horrifying. The match had barely begun when disaster struck. Sabu charged at Benoit right away, but Benoit caught him with a hard knee to the gut. Moments later, Benoit grabbed Sabu's legs and tossed him high into the air for a big maneuver. It was supposed to be a routine throw where Sabu would land on his stomach. Something went terribly wrong. Sabu couldn't adjust in mid-air and rotated awkwardly. Coming down almost vertically, he crashed headfirst onto the canvas, all his weight driving into his neck. There was a sickening thud as his body folded unnaturally on impact. In that instant, the arena knew this wasn't a typical wrestling stunt. It was a real injury, and a horrifying one at that. Sabu somehow rolled out of the ring, clutching his neck in agony. He even told ECW owner Paul Heyman, who had rushed to ringside, that something was terribly wrong with his neck. For a moment, Sabu couldn't move his limbs. He experienced temporary paralysis from the shock to his spinal cord. The referee and Heyman frantically checked on Sabu as he lay there, barely moving. In the ring, Benoit realized the severity of what happened. To avoid panicking the crowd, he stayed in character and tried to keep the show going, pacing around and gesturing as if taunting Sabu. Almost on cue, Sabu's ally 911 ran into the ring and confronted Benoit, and they improvised a scuffle. Soon, other wrestlers rushed in and a wild brawl broke out, but the priority was giving medics time to tend Sabu out of the spotlight. The match was over almost as soon as it started. Barely 2 minutes in, it was declared a no contest due to injury. Sabu was hurried to the hospital for treatment, his neck clearly broken. Backstage, Benoit was reportedly visibly shaken by what happened. He had never intended to truly hurt his opponent, but to one freeing moment, it happened. In the aftermath, ECW actually wove the incident into their storyline. The accidents earned Benoit the nickname, the Crippler, in the wrestling world. As for Sabu, he miraculously avoided any permanent paralysis. He did have a legitimate broken neck, yet in an almost unbelievable display of toughness, Sabu returned to the ring only about 2 weeks later. Fans were stunned. Sabu proved to be practically as indestructible as his gimmick suggested. In fact, he would wrestle for another 30 years, finally having his retirement match on April 18, 2025, only to die just under a month later on May 12th. And as for Chris Benoit, well, we all know what became of him. At SummerSlam 1997, Owen Hart's Intercontinental title was on the line, with the added stipulation that Stone Cold Steve Austin must kiss his ass if he lost. Austin's neck had already been flaring up with nerve stingers, and he mentioned it to Hart during their pre-match walkthrough. They agreed on a tombstone piledriver spot. Austin asked for the kneel-down version, but Hart felt safer sitting out and promised he'd protect him. Near the finish, Hart lifted him. Austin's head sat about half a foot below Hart's thighs, and the sit-down drop spiked him straight on the crown. The jolt compressed the C4 to the C6 area and stunned his spinal cord. For a few seconds, he couldn't feel his arms or legs. Flat on the canvas, he whispered to referee Earl Hebner that he was numb and feared he might be paralyzed. Hart stalled by jawing at the crowd. Feeling slowly crept back into Austin's body, and he crawled forward, hooking the weakest roll-up pin anyone had ever seen, yet still winning the belt. 3 officials dragged him upright, while his eyes were glassy and his hands shook, making the celebration feel hollow. Hospital scans showed a bruised spinal cord and a severe stinger, not a clean break, but the damage left lingering numbness and forced him to vacate his title while doctors debated surgery. Backstage, wrestlers whispered about how close the company's hottest prospect had come to a wheelchair, and Austin was angry because Owen Hart had phoned only once to apologize. The WWE turned the real pain into storyline heat with an Owen 316 I Just Broke Your Neck t-shirt, keeping the feud alive, while Austin rehabilitated. The injury pushed him away from technical chains towards a bruising brawler style that, ironically, helped launch the Attitude Era's biggest star into overdrive, though Austin's neck was never the same after the injury. And by 2003, he was forced to retire as his body simply couldn't handle the wear and tear anymore. In January 2001, Sid Vicious was set to main event WCW's Sim pay-per-view. Despite being known for his power rather than his aerial moves, due to being over 300 pounds, he was pressed by WCW official John Laurinaitis to attempt a high-risk maneuver that night. Sid was reluctant and voiced that he didn't feel comfortable doing it, but the plan for the match had already been made, and he went along with it. During the 4-way match, Sid climbed up the second turnbuckle and leapt off, trying to deliver a flying big boot to his opponent, Scott Steiner. The moment Sid landed, everything went horribly wrong. His leg buckled on impact, bending at almost a 45-degree angle. In that instant, he snapped his lower leg, fracturing both the tibia and fibula bones. Sid collapsed to the mat as his lower leg visibly dangled at a horrifying angle. Even the other wrestlers were shaken. Jeff Jarrett later recalled seeing Sid's thigh and kneecap going one way while his ankle flopped in the other direction. It was instantly clear to everyone that the injury was catastrophic. Sid was obviously unable to continue, and the match had to be ended immediately. The referee and wrestlers quickly improvised an ending. Steiner hurriedly pinned Sid to wrap up the match as medical staff rushed in. Sid was carefully stretchered out and taken to a hospital in Indianapolis. That night, doctors performed emergency surgery to repair the damage, inserting a 17-inch metal rod into Sid's shattered leg. He would undergo multiple surgeries and a very long rehabilitation process after that. This horrific injury effectively ended Sid's full-time wrestling career. While Sid did recover enough to wrestle a few years later, no one who saw his leg snap that night could ever forget it. It remains one of, if not the most infamous and disturbing injuries in pro wrestling history, as nothing else like it had ever been seen before or since.
You see on the outside. Down. Wait a minute. Oh, hold on. I guess the time is right. Showtime. Showtime. Who is it?
Hayabusa was a Japanese wrestling star known for his high-flying style and daredevil moves. He was regarded as being the heart and soul of FMW. By the early 2000s, Hayabusa had become the face of the promotion, respected as one of the most talented and fearless performers. In October 2001, during a main event match at Tokyo's Korakuen Hall, everything changed. Hayabusa attempted a springboard moonsault, a move he had pulled off many times before, but this time, as he launched himself, his foot slipped on the rope. In an instant, he lost control of his rotation. Hayabusa came crashing down headfirst onto the ring canvas, causing his neck to snap back. The impact was catastrophic, and he cracked 2 vertebrae in his neck. The sickening thud and the sides of his body crumpling to the mat stunned the audience. He lay there motionless, instantly paralyzed from the neck down. Ringside staff and medics rushed into the ring as the arena fell into an eerie hush. Overall, it was a very horrifying scene. Surgeons that night fused the damaged vertebrae and fought off a post-operation fever, but the diagnosis was grim. Any feeling below his chest was gone. FMW lost its top drawer overnight, and the company limped along for a few months before folding the next year. Hayabusa spent years in a wheelchair, slowly regaining the use of his arms and hands, teaching himself basic guitar so he could still perform on stage, and started a small promotion called WMF so younger wrestlers had somewhere to work. A decade later, he amazed doctors by standing on his own and, with the help of crutches, was finally able to walk. Even then, he joked that he couldn't hit the Phoenix Splash anymore. Unfortunately, Hayabusa would pass away several years later in 2016 from a cerebral hemorrhage at the age of 47. Even after all these years, the footage of his career-ending injury is still incredibly hard to watch. The sides of his neck snapping back and ending his career in an instant is one of the most haunting images in professional wrestling history. Darren Drozdov was a professional wrestler who had previously been an NFL player and even got the nickname Puke for a notorious incident where he vomited on Monday Night Football. On October 5, 1999, during a WWE SmackDown taping at Nassau Coliseum in Long Island, Droz faced D'Lo Brown in what seemed like a routine exhibition match. Partway through the match, Brown went for his signature running powerbomb on Droz, a move they'd done before without incident, but this time it went horribly wrong. Droz was wearing a loose shirt that night, which made it hard for D'Lo to get a good grip on him, and Droz couldn't get enough jump to aid the lift. As a result, D'Lo couldn't hoist him up properly, and Droz came crashing down headfirst onto the mat. The impact was brutal. Droz landed directly on his head, fracturing 2 vertebrae in his neck. He collapsed and lay motionless on the canvas, instantly paralyzed from the neck down. Everyone present realized that this was not a planned stunt. It was a real, gruesome injury. Ringside medics and staff rushed to help, and Droz was put on a stretcher and immediately taken to Nassau County Medical Center, where doctors performed hours of emergency surgery on his neck. Because SmackDown was pre-taped, WWE cut the accident out of the broadcast. The footage has never been aired due to how shocking it was, and only a brief clip of Droz being carried out on a stretcher was later seen in a "Don't try this at home" PSA. Droz's injury left him a quadriplegic. Though he eventually regained some movement in his upper body and arms, he remained permanently wheelchair-bound for the rest of his life, right up until his death in June 2023 at the age of 54. While his wrestling career had ended prematurely, he stayed on WWE's payroll as a columnist and web host, and in interviews years later, he said that his life was still worth living, saying, "Just because I'm in a chair doesn't mean my life is over." And to be fair, his wheelchair was actually really cool, and it was designed and commissioned for him by his old college friend Kevin Plank, the founder of Under Armour. Droz never once blamed D'Lo Brown for the accident, saying that professional wrestling carries risks every single time the competitors step into the ring. That said, even though everyone has accepted that what happened wasn't D'Lo's fault, interviews really do seem to indicate that deep down, D'Lo really does blame himself for the incident that changed Droz's life forever.
It was just And it could have been anybody in the ring with him that night. It just happened to be me. Happened to be my sad misfortune to be in the ring with him. And because of that, a man's paralyzed. People ask me all the time, does that affect me? Hell yeah. If it didn't, I wouldn't be human. For probably about a year, I wrestled differently. I second-guessed everything I did. And that was probably, I should have taken time off. And if it hadn't been for, Jim Ross really talking to me, I was going to quit the business. I was done. I was this close to saying, the hell with it. I couldn't, because no one ever got hurt on my watch. No one has sense. And someone is trusting me to give me their body. I want them to walk out of the ring the same condition they came in. And that's one thing I prided myself on. And really, I was really, really close to quitting. Like I said, Jim Ross sat down with me, and we had a long, probably 3-hour conversation full of football references and how we all know the risks going into the game. How it could have been anybody. And that accident not only affected me professionally, but personally. I was a whole different person. I almost separated from my fiance during that time. I'm not a party guy, but all of a sudden I was just living life like there was no tomorrow. Ass wide open, just gone. Because I didn't know what to do. And that was my way of, I was depressed, I didn't know it. So my way of trying to get rid of my depression was to party. And that took about a year where I didn't know really what was going on.
Chick Garibaldi had been wrestling since the late 1930s, and by 1961, he was 46 years old, but still active in the ring. In February of that year, he stepped into the ring at Sunnyside Garden in Queens, New York, for a match against a young Bruno Sammartino. It was supposed to be just a typical show at the popular arena, with Garibaldi as the veteran facing the rising star. The match ran steady for roughly 10 minutes, with the two grappling and tackling each other. Then came a simple body slam from Sammartino in the center of the ring. Garibaldi hit the canvas. His eyes rolled back, and he didn't stir. Bruno leaned over for the cover, saw the blank stare and gargling sound, and waved frantically for the referee instead. At first, the crowd thought that Garibaldi was selling, but the hush that fell a second later said otherwise. The referee motioned to the New York State Athletic Commission doctor at ringside. The doctor slid through the ropes with a syringe of adrenaline, while Sammartino held Garibaldi's chest, trying to feel a heartbeat. Garibaldi never regained consciousness. Backstage efforts failed. A medical examiner later ruled the cause of death a massive heart attack, noting it almost certainly struck the instant his back hit the mat. Some reports claimed he was pronounced dead in the arena, while others said he slipped away minutes later in the dressing room. But either way, he was gone before the ambulance arrived. Bruno Sammartino, just 25 years old at the time, was shattered. He later told interviewers he replayed that slam in his head for months, wondering if he could have done anything differently.
Worst things I'd have to say that happened. I'm wrestling Chick Garibaldi in Sunnyside Garden, scooped Chick up and gave him his big body slam. I noticed that his body wasn't responding. He lay there limp. But that's not what concerned me. What bothered me was his eyes. I saw his eyes kind of roll back and a weird sound came out of his mouth. By now the ambulance came, and by the time they came, he was gone. He had died. It was just a regular wrestling move and so forth, but the facts are that Chick Garibaldi did die, and it stayed with me for the longest time.
Mitsuharu Misawa was a legend in Japanese pro wrestling, with a long and storied career. By 2009, he was 46 years old and still competing regularly, even though he had been wrestling hurt for some time with chronic neck and shoulder injuries. His years of wear and tear didn't stop him from performing until one fateful night in Hiroshima. On June 13, 2009, Misawa stepped into the ring for a tag team match at the Hiroshima Green Arena against the duo of Akitoshi Saito and Bison Smith for the GHC Tag Team Championship. During the match, Saito delivered what seemed like a routine belly-to-back suplex to Misawa. It was a basic wrestling move Misawa had taken countless times before, but this time, something went terribly wrong. Misawa landed awkwardly and did not get back up, lying motionless on the mat. For a moment, everyone was confused. Then the horror of the situation became clear. Fans in the arena began chanting Misawa's name, hoping to see him stir, as they had many times in the past. A distraught Saito stood nearby, realizing that his opponent wasn't responding. The referee immediately stopped the match, and ringside doctors and trainers rushed into the ring to check on Misawa. In the chaos, all of the other wrestlers on the show gathered around the ring, and the crowd's chants grew quiet and uneasy. Medics began performing CPR on Misawa right there in the ring, as the audience looked on in shock. According to reports, his body had already started turning purple while they tried to revive him, a sign that he wasn't breathing. The arena fell into an eerie hush, except for the frantic efforts of the medical team. After several agonizing minutes, Misawa was placed on a stretcher and rushed out of the arena to a waiting ambulance. The show was cut short and did not continue after the accident. Misawa was pronounced dead at the hospital later that night. He had been just a few days shy of his 47th birthday. While the exact cause of death was not publicly released, it was widely reported that the impact from the suplex had severed his cervical spinal cord, triggering cardiac arrest. In other words, the routine bump broke Misawa's neck and caused his heart to stop almost immediately. It was a horrific end to his storied career, a beloved champion collapsing in the ring he ruled for decades, in front of a stunned crowd that could only watch in disbelief. Oro was a young Mexican luchador who was on the rise in the early 1990s. As his name meant gold in Spanish, he wrestled under a gold mask and was known for his exciting high-flying style. Oro would try daring moves that few others attempted, sometimes putting his own safety at risk for the sake of the spectacle. By 1993, he was only 21 years old, but already a popular attraction in Mexico's lucha libre scene, celebrated for his agility and fearless performances. On October 26, 1993, Oro stepped into the ring for a six-man tag team match at Arena Coliseo in Mexico City. Before the bout, he told fellow wrestlers that he had planned to take a dramatic kobashi bump, a dangerous headfirst flip onto the mat, to make an ordinary clothesline look especially devastating. This idea was inspired by Japanese wrestler Kenta Kobashi, who had once taken a similar frightening fall that looked like it nearly broke his neck. Oro was determined to shock the audience with a big stunt, staying true to his high-risk-taking reputation. During the match, one of Oro's opponents, the masked wrestler Chaos, delivered what was supposed to be a clothesline, though looks more like a hard chop. Instead of spinning in the air like he planned, he fell flat on the back of his head. After this, the two exchanged moves for a few seconds, before taking the fight outside the ring, with Oro chasing Chaos to the back. As Oro began making his way back to the ring, he took a few steps up ringside, before suddenly collapsing to the floor. Ringside officials and fellow wrestlers quickly realized something was horribly wrong, as Oro lay motionless. Medics rushed in while Oro's brother, Plata, knelt by his side. In a disturbing scene, his brother shouted, "Don't fall asleep," desperately trying to keep Oro conscious. The unconscious 21-year-old was placed on a stretcher as the crowd looked on in shock. Oro's pulse was faint, and he had stopped responding. He was rushed toward an ambulance, but died before reaching the hospital. Later, doctors suspected that the headfirst landing caused a brain aneurysm, though no autopsy was performed to confirm it. Oro's promising young life had been cut short in the middle of a wrestling match. His death in the ring was a horrifying reality amid what was meant to be a scripted performance. Dan Spider Quirk was an independent wrestler who regularly wrestled for Ultimate Championship Wrestling in New England. On the night of May 28, 2005, he worked a match at the American Legion Post in Taunton, Massachusetts, a low-budget show where the ring sat on a hardwood floor without protective mats. Quirk told friends he wanted at least one big crowd-popping dive. The building drew barely 100 fans, but he treated it like a pay-per-view. Mid-match, he climbed to the top turnbuckle and launched a moonsault to the floor, a blind backflip that relied on his opponent being in the perfect position to catch him. The catch never came. Quirk rotated cleanly, then struck the exposed floor, head first with full momentum of the flip. People nearest the crash heard a sharp crack. A pool of blood spread under his head, while his legs twitched once and went still. The referee threw his arms into an X and the building went silent. Wrestlers who seconds earlier were trading forearms dropped out of character and waved frantically for help. Paramedics slid in from the back, fitted a collar, and tried to steady his neck on the splintered floorboards as fans watched in shock. Quirk never regained consciousness. The ambulance crew continued CPR all the way to Morton Hospital, but doctors declared him dead a short time later. He was only 22. Eyewitnesses later told reporters that the absence of Matt likely turned a scary miss into a fatal one. Within hours, the story hit wrestling news sites. It emphasized that blood was visible the moment he hit. Quirk's death rattled the independent circuit because it happened far from television, with no safety net and no athletic commission oversight. Industry veterans like Al Snow and Paul Bearer called for tougher regulation, arguing that small promotions often skip basics such as ringside padding and mandatory medical staff. In March 2015, Mexican wrestler Perro Aguayo Jr. stepped into the ring for a tag team match in Tijuana, Mexico. Aguayo, a 20-year veteran of the sport and the son of Lucha Libre legend Perro Aguayo Sr., teamed up with Manic that night to face Lucha Libre icon Rey Mysterio and Extreme Tiger. During the match, Mysterio attempted a head scissors takedown on Aguayo Jr., aiming to set him up for his trademark 619 finisher. Aguayo was sent awkwardly out of the ring by the move, but he quickly re-entered to continue. Mysterio then delivered a dropkick to Aguayo's upper back, trying again to position him on the ropes for the 619. At that moment, Aguayo suddenly slumped over the middle rope, completely limp and unresponsive. For a brief time, no one realized how serious it was. It almost looked like part of the show. Aguayo's tag partner, Manic, even tried to shake him awake, thinking he was just knocked out. Meanwhile, the match continued around them for nearly 2 minutes before the referee and others halted the action upon grasping that Aguayo was critically injured. Another wrestler, Conan, who was at ringside, also rushed over and urgently signaled for medics as Aguayo lay lifeless in the ring. Aguayo was finally carried out to the ring on a makeshift stretcher, reportedly just a piece of plywood, and rushed to a hospital only a block away. Medical personnel tried to revive him for over an hour, but he was pronounced dead shortly after at 1 a.m. on March 21, 2015. An autopsy later revealed that he had fractured 3 vertebrae in his upper neck during the match, essentially breaking his neck. The severe cervical spine trauma caused a stroke and triggered a cardiac arrest, meaning Aguayo likely died in the ring almost instantly from the impact. He was only 35 years old. I've already talked about this incident twice before, but I really couldn't make a video about horrifying wrestling injuries without mentioning what happened to Owen Hart, as it really is by far the most infamous incident ever to happen in a wrestling ring. In early 1999, Owen Hart worked under a masked alter ego called the Blue Blazer, a goofy superhero parody that let him lean into slapstick, even though fans knew how good he really was. At Over the Edge in Kansas City on May 23rd, the Blazer was booked to descend from the arena ceiling on a cable, flail around in mid-air, and then drop the last few feet as if the gadget had malfunctioned. A new quick-release shackle replaced the heavier sailing harness Owen had used before. The clip opened with a light touch so he could unhook himself for the comedic pratfall. During a pre-taped backstage skit that kept cameras off the ring, he was already dangling almost 80 feet above it. Something triggered the release, and he plunged straight down, hitting chest first on the top rope near a turnbuckle, before crumpling to the mat. Many spectators thought it was part of the show, until they noticed the referee signaling frantically and Owen lying motionless. Medics jumped in, while commentators abandoned the script. The fall had torn his aorta, flooding his chest with blood. CPR in the ring could not restart his heart, and he was pronounced dead at the hospital minutes later. Shockingly, the pay-per-view event was not stopped. It continued, even as Owen's blood remained on the canvas that night. Viewers at home soon heard Jim Ross's infamous announcement of Owen's death an hour later.
Here in Kansas City, tragedy befell the World Wrestling Federation and all of us. Owen Hart was set to make an entrance from the ceiling, and he fell from the ceiling. And I have the unfortunate responsibility to let everyone know that Owen Hart has died. Owen Hart has tragically died from that accident here tonight.
But those in the arena did not find out until they left the show. The sight of Owen Hart lying lifeless in the ring, followed by the decision to finish the show, became one of the most unsettling events ever associated with professional wrestling. And that's the end of the video, folks. I don't really have anything to say this time except be sure to like this video, leave a comment, subscribe if you're new, and consider donating on Patreon. All patrons get early ad-free access to videos, and the higher tier members get their names on the board as well as a shout out. Thanks to all my patrons. Especially those whose names are on the screen now, particularly Brendan O'Connell, Adam Clayton, Jalen Campbell, Count Lagula, Danny Jade, Paul Mendoza, Alex Christmas, Brody Millers, Stimulate, and of course, Dick the Cock Johnson and the Woodmaster at WrestleMania X69 or maybe not dude. Thank you very much for watching and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.